What a beautiful life was that. Hopefully that brings you a little bit of energy as well. And thank you for listening to us today. And today we have Louise Jeffrey, who she say already hello, but I would like to introduce her. And she is the eating psychology coach for Mindful Life. And she's going to teach us all about the side of psychologists and mentor and that right mindset to approach with the right way to eat, and definitely something that we will benefit today with some tips and advice from her. So tell us more about Louise, about eating psychology. How does it work?
Okay, so eating psychology is it's a new and emerging field, actually out of the US, and it's different to naturopathy or nutrition or dietetics in the sense that we're actually looking at how we eat rather than what we eat. So all of us are eaters, otherwise we wouldn't be alive. And what we know is that it's really just as much about the way that you eat rather than just what you eat. And so what we do is we focused on eating behaviors and drivers and triggers towards unwanted eating behaviors and how we can help people to transform their relationship with food and their body. So it's really people who have weight and eating challenges that will come and see me.
So how actually is somebody else suffering from those issues, how they can recognize they having those unwanted behaviors of eating in the right way? So how do you work? How do you focus really about correcting or helping those people who has those issues with unwanted behaviors?
So generally people who come and see me, who are either in one-to-one practice or in the groups or the workshops that I do, are people not necessarily who have mental health issues around severe eating issues. It's really people like me and you who suffer from emotional eating, binge eating or overeating. And many people, not all of them, but many people who suffer from emotional eating, binge eating or overeating, in fact have weight issues as well. The two obviously go hand in hand. So what we're really aiming to do is to help them to transform their unwanted eating behaviors so that they can achieve their ideal weight or reach their ideal weight sustainably. Because as we know, and we'll obviously get on to talk about this in a moment, unfortunately, the only option really available to most of us is dieting. And what I will tell you later on is that dieting really doesn't work for sustainable weight loss. So I'm going to talk to you about what does work.
Yeah, that sounds good. So how people can recognize that they're having this wrong behavior?
Well, we don't want to call it wrong because it isn't really, but it's certainly unwanted and it can be very, very unhelpful. The way that we recognize that we have unwanted eating behaviors is where we are eating past fullness. Okay, so when we overeat, we also know that we have unwanted eating behaviors that might be emotional eating when we eat when we're stressed or after we're stressed, or when we eat in response to some sort of emotional trigger. So we might be feeling sad, anxious, unhappy or depressed and we eat. The other thing is if we are eating big amounts or large amounts of food at one particular time, then that is classified as binge eating. So that can be driven by the emotions or it can be driven by anything. But when we're eating more than we should or more than is necessary for our body to use as fuel, then that's an unwanted eating behavior.
Okay, that sounds very interesting. So if people overeat really quite quickly, I mean they're eating without being aware that they're full.
Yes.
So how they can really start recognizing that for them to start moving on and getting some support and some help?
So the interesting thing is that the research, there's been quite a lot of research done recently around weight loss and obesity. Certainly in Australia there's been some very, very interesting studies done, and what we know is that around 60% of women, in fact, have emotional eating or overeating habits or challenges that they'd like to change. And what we also know is that 95% of people who go on a diet don't actually aren't actually able to maintain the weight loss that they get from the diet, so they end up putting on more weight back on again. So really what we're trying to do is to help people to move away from dieting and to start focusing on more sustainable ways to lose weight, and to change their eating habits.
That's a really hard area to start changing, I guess. So what would be a first step for someone who is going through such eating behaviors?
Well, the first step obviously is to seek support, is to seek help. And as I mentioned before, the work that I do, actually we have people who come in and spend time in one-to-one practice, or I run one-day workshops, and I'll talk a little bit later about being able to attend one of these workshops for free, for some of our listeners, or in groups. But really one of the first steps, or one of the tips that I can give people today to take away, or to start really transforming their relationship with food today, is to slow down with their eating, is to become a more mindful eater. So the key guidelines that we give people as a first step, and what I really want to highlight here, is that this is what we call a top-line strategy. It can be really helpful in the beginning, and certainly it's something that we use we continue on with this eating behavior, but it's for us to really get to the bottom of the unwanted eating behavior. Everybody's drivers and triggers are different, and we have to spend a little bit more time kind of getting to the bottom. But the guidelines that I'm going to share with you today around mindful eating are these. The first thing to do is to make sure that every single time you eat, whether or not it is a main meal or just a snack, is to make sure that you're sitting down. Because you'd actually be surprised how many people eat on the run, or eat in the car, or eat while they're standing up because they're busy dealing with the children, or whatever it happens to be. So the first thing is to make sure that you're sitting down.
Sitting down, that's a great advice, yes.
The second thing to make sure is that we take 10 long, deep breaths before we actually start eating. So most of us, in fact, live our lives in the stress response. So most of us have high levels of cortisol or adrenaline running through our bodies. We live our lives at a fairly fast pace. Even though you may not realize it, the chances are your cortisol levels are fairly high. So what happens when we're in the stress response, our digestive capacity is reduced by 60 to 70%. So we know from scientific research, when they've done studies on people who eat mindfully and those who eat while they're distracted either with the TV or with the radio or a whole lot of other stuff going on, that their digestive capacity, their nutrient uptake and assimilation, and their gastric emptying time is reduced by about 60 to 70%. So what we're aiming to do is to get you to almost trick your body in believing that it's in the relaxation response, even if you're still fairly stressed in your mind. As long as your body feels relaxed, then your digestive capacity is increased. So 10 long, deep abdominal breaths through the nostrils, or in through the nose, out through the mouth, before you even pick up your knife and fork. Then the step 3 is, once you pick up your knife and fork and you start eating, is to make sure that you have absolutely no distractions. So no TV, no iPad, no iPhone, no computer. The only thing that you can really be doing, which is absolutely fine, is to be talking to other people and connecting with others, because as human beings we are in fact primarily designed to experience pleasure through love and connection with others while we're eating. So we sit down and we make sure that we're focused on our food, but at the same time we can be experiencing connection, as long as it's a happy connection rather than unhappy times. And so we focus on our food, we can smell the food, taste the food, we actually consider or think about where the food has come from, and really enjoy the food, so eat with all of our senses. And at the same time, what we suggest is that for a big meal we take 10 to 20 minutes to finish our meal, which means that you really have to slow down and chew, and that if it's not and it's a snack, then 5 to 10 minutes is okay.
How about the size of the meals? People can really eat very fast when it's so small as well, so they still feel hungry. So what is the best way to approach that? Having a medium size, or how they can even know what is the right size for them?
Well, what we say is to start small. I mean, often, I'm sure you've heard the saying that, often my eyes are bigger than my stomach. So what we say is, a lot of people feel unsafe when they don't have a lot of food on their plate, because there may be issues around feeling like food was scarce when they were younger, or being told to eat everything on their plate. So the fact is we don't know what each person's personal drivers and triggers are, but what we say is to start small. So to start with a small to medium sized portion on your plate, depending on how hungry you are at the time, and then telling yourself that it's safe and that it's okay and that you can always go back for more. But what you will find is when you slow down and when you eat mindfully, you will get fuller a lot quicker. Your mind will experience and register that you've actually had food, because when you're distracted, your mind doesn't actually even register, and your body doesn't register. And when the body doesn't register that it's had food or experienced pleasure from food, because we're primarily designed as well to experience pleasure from food, it will drive you later on in the day to actually experience more pleasure or to get the nutrients that it needs, because the body's constantly scanning for nutrients.
I have one question before we go into a break, and that will be, does really people need to wait to eat, actually to wait to start eating when they're hungry? Do they need to wait that?
That's a very good question.
But we can be back.
All right, do you want to come back to that after the break? All right, we'll come back to that after the break.
Thank you.